The lawyer paused mid-sentence. Not the kind of pause where someone's just catching their breath. This was the kind that makes the whole room hold its breath, heavy, tense, full of meaning. His eyes slowly lifted from the document and locked onto my sister. And then he said it. One sentence. That was all it took. The room went dead silent. Conversations evaporated. Even the hum of the air conditioner sounded deafening. My sister's confident smirk, the one she had been flaunting all afternoon, flickered. Not gone entirely, but just enough for me to notice. That was the exact moment I realized something had gone very, very wrong for her. And for the first time in weeks, I felt like I could finally take a breath. My name is Madison Carter. I'm a marketing analyst living in Chicago. I've always been the type to keep my head down, work hard, and play by the rules. That's probably why what happened with my sister hit me like a ton of bricks, because I never saw it coming. We were all gathered in my late grandfather's study that afternoon. The room felt smaller than I remembered. Maybe it was the tension, or maybe it was the way everyone kept glancing anywhere but at me. My parents sat together on one side, exchanging nervous looks. My uncle leaned back in his chair, arms crossed, and my sister, Samantha, sat right across from me, calm as a cucumber. Way too calm. She looked like someone who already knew how this was going to end. And at that point, I thought I did too, because a week earlier, she had already taken everything from me. My entire share of the trust fund. Gone. Signed over. Finalized. Untouchable. Or at least that's what she wanted everyone to believe. I remember sitting there, barely paying attention as the lawyer droned through the formalities. My mind wasn't even in the room anymore. It was stuck on that moment. The moment I realized what she had done, how smoothly she had pulled it off, and how no one, not even my own parents, had lifted a finger to stop her. But now, sitting there in that room, something felt different. The lawyer's tone had shifted, and when he paused and looked at her the way he did, I knew this wasn't over. Not by a long shot. Because what happened in that room didn't just expose the truth, it rewrote everything. But to understand how we got there, you need to know exactly what my sister did, and how she managed to convince everyone that it was completely above board.
My sister had always known how to push everyone's buttons, but this time she went way too far, and I should have seen it coming. Growing up, Samantha always had a way of getting what she wanted. She knew the right words to say, the perfect smile to flash, and the exact moment to swoop in when my parents were distracted. I, on the other hand, had always been more of a quiet, by-the-book kind of person. I worked hard, kept my nose clean, and figured that doing things the right way would eventually pay off. But when it came to Samantha, that approach never seemed to matter. Now, fast forward to a week before the trust fund showdown. I had just learned that she'd somehow maneuvered herself into a position where it looked like my share of the inheritance was hers. It wasn't just money we were talking about. It was years of family planning, my grandfather's hard-earned savings, and my future security. Losing it felt like a punch to the gut. And the worst part, most of my family seemed to think I was overreacting. Samantha? She looked completely unbothered, like a cat that had knocked over the expensive vase and was just waiting for everyone else to clean up the mess. I remember sitting in the living room that evening, trying to explain my concerns to my parents. I could see the hesitation in their eyes, the doubt creeping in. They weren't fully on her side, but they weren't stepping up for me either. It was like walking on eggshells, trying not to start another family fight that would leave me looking like the bad guy. And that's when it hit me. Samantha had been playing this game for years. She wasn't just opportunistic. She knew exactly how to manipulate the people around her to get her way. And this time, she'd hit the jackpot. I tried to warn myself to stay calm, to not let my emotions take over. But deep down, I knew that things were spiraling. I could see her smug expression every time she glanced at me, like she was silently saying, "Nothing you do will stop me." It was infuriating. And yet, at the same time, I knew this wasn't the end. Because if there was one thing my grandfather had taught me, it was that rules and documents could work in your favor, if you knew how to use them. Looking back, I should have realized exactly what she was planning the moment she started digging into the trust fund paperwork, but I didn't, and that mistake almost cost me everything.
The day I realized my sister had taken my share, it didn't hit me like a storm. It hit me like a slow punch to the gut. Quiet, sneaky, and almost too cruel to believe. It started like any normal morning. I walked into the family office to check some paperwork, expecting the usual stacks of bills and letters. But then I saw it. Samantha's handwriting. My signature forged, or at least manipulated just enough to look legitimate. And there it was, the transfer of my portion of the trust fund officially under her name. I felt my stomach twist, my heart raced, my hands went cold. I read it again, thinking maybe I was imagining things, but no, it was real. Everything I had been counting on, gone. What made it worse was how quietly she had done it. No shouting, no threats, no dramatic scene, just a few signatures, a little maneuvering behind the scenes, and suddenly everyone thought she was in the right. I confronted her immediately. "Samantha, what did you do?" I asked, trying to keep my voice steady. Her smirk was maddening. "I just made sure things were handled properly," she said, as if she were discussing grocery lists instead of taking my inheritance. And to my horror, some of my parents nodded along. They weren't exactly cheering for her, but they weren't stopping her either. It felt like I was trapped in a nightmare. No one believed me, no one had my back, and my sister, she was riding the wave like a pro surfer catching the perfect swell. I wanted to scream, I wanted to cry, but I didn't. I knew losing my cool would only make her look stronger. And that's when I realized I had to find a different way to fight back. I had to be smarter, faster, and more calculated. As the day dragged on, I kept replaying the situation in my head. How could she have pulled this off? How had I missed all the signs? And most importantly, was there even a way to undo it? Because the way I saw it, if Samantha thought she had won, she was in for a huge surprise. I sat there, staring at the papers, feeling completely powerless, until I remembered something my grandfather always said: the devil is in the details. And that's when I realized there might be a loophole, one small detail she hadn't thought of. But would it be enough to turn the tables? I tried to fight back, but every door I knocked on slammed shut in my face. Every call, every plea, every attempt to get help, nothing worked. I felt completely alone. After discovering what Samantha had done, I thought at least my parents would step in. After all, this was our grandfather's trust fund, something he had worked decades to build for all of his grandchildren. But when I brought it up, their eyes darted nervously. I could see the discomfort, the hesitation. They didn't say it out loud, but it was clear. They didn't want to challenge Samantha. "She's your sister," my dad finally said, avoiding my gaze. "She probably thinks she's just doing what's best." Doing what's best? My share, my future was gone, and they were acting like it was no big deal. I felt a mix of disbelief, anger, and fear. How could my own family let this happen? And what made it even worse was seeing Samantha act like nothing had happened. She carried herself with that smug confidence, like she'd already won some grand prize. It was like watching a cat take over the kitchen while you're stuck outside clawing at the door. I was furious, but there was nothing I could do, or so it felt. I spent hours going over every possible way to fight back, every legal form, every clause in the trust fund paperwork. I tried to find anything, even the tiniest loophole that could reverse what she had done. But each time, I hit a dead end.
Every lead seemed to vanish. Every attempt to get help ended in frustration. And that's when the crushing reality hit me. For the first time in my life, I was powerless. Completely and utterly powerless. I felt trapped, like I was sinking in quicksand while everyone else watched from the sidelines. The unfairness of it all, my sister grinning, my parents frozen in indecision, was unbearable. But somewhere in the back of my mind, I remembered something my grandfather always said. Even the smallest detail can tip the scales. I didn't know it at the time, but that lesson would become the key to everything that was about to happen. I almost walked out of that office and let it all go, thinking maybe it wasn't worth the fight. But then I realized one thing. Samantha might have taken my share, but she hadn't considered one critical detail, and that detail would change everything.
If I hadn't walked into that room that afternoon, I would have never heard the sentence that completely changed everything. One simple line, and my sister's smug smile would vanish forever. The day started just like any other family meeting, but the tension was thick enough to cut with a knife. Samantha strutted in, head high, clearly expecting another easy win. She probably thought the trust fund was already hers, no questions asked. I, on the other hand, tried to appear calm. Inside, my heart was pounding, my palms sweaty, and my mind racing. I kept replaying my grandfather's advice. The devil is in the details. And I had spent days combing through every document, every clause, every single word in the trust papers. I knew something was there. I just had to wait for the right moment. The lawyer began reading aloud, his tone calm but precise. He went through the formalities, every number, every name, every minor clause. Samantha's confidence didn't waver. My parents exchanged glances, still unsure. And then it happened. The sentence. Any beneficiary found to have manipulated or falsified signatures shall forfeit all claims to their share. Time seemed to stop. Samantha's eyes went wide. Her face paled. My parents froze mid-sip of coffee. Even the lawyer's pen hovered in mid-air as the weight of the words sank in. It was that one sentence, a clause so small, so hidden, that nullified everything she had done. Every sneaky move, every forged signature, every attempt to take what wasn't hers, all completely reversed. The room was dead silent. You could hear a pin drop. I could barely believe it myself. For weeks, I had felt helpless, trapped, and beaten. And now, justice had shown up in the most unexpected way. Samantha tried to argue, tried to wiggle her way out of it, but the lawyer didn't even flinch. The words were crystal clear. There was no loophole for her. She had overlooked the smallest but most powerful detail. I felt a mix of relief, triumph, and disbelief. The fight wasn't over yet, but for the first time in days, I could breathe. My share was safe, and the tables had finally turned. One sentence, that's all it took. But what happened next in the aftermath of that reveal completely shocked everyone in that room. And you won't believe how my sister reacted when the truth hit her like a freight train. In less than 5 minutes, everything my sister thought she had won was gone, and the look on her face, priceless. After that one sentence was read aloud, the room felt like it had been hit by a tidal wave. Samantha's confidence crumbled in real time. The smug smirk that had tormented me for weeks disappeared, replaced by sheer panic. She stammered, tried to argue, but it was like speaking to a brick wall. The clause in the trust fund was ironclad. There was no room for manipulation or excuses.
My parents, who had been unsure and hesitant, finally relaxed. Relief washed over their faces as they realized that fairness had been restored. I took a deep breath, feeling the weight lift off my shoulders. Weeks of anxiety, sleepless nights, and constant worry evaporated. It was a sense of justice that words can't fully capture. Samantha tried one last desperate move, pleading, bargaining, even blaming me, but nothing worked. The lawyer was firm, and the law was on my side. Every trick she had played, every attempt to take what wasn't hers, was now completely undone, and for the first time, I felt powerful. Not in a bragging way, but in the sense that I stayed calm, stayed smart, and stayed patient while the truth took care of itself. Looking around the room, I noticed the subtle reactions. My parents exchanged knowing glances, silently apologizing for not acting sooner. My uncle shook his head, impressed in how everything had unfolded. Samantha, she sat there stunned, realizing she had underestimated both the law and me. It was a moment that perfectly captured the phrase my grandfather always used: patience and attention to detail win the day. I finally spoke, feeling the words settle in the room. She thought she had taken my future, but one sentence exposed everything. The tension broke like a snapped rope. Relief, satisfaction, and even a little vindication washed over me. I had fought for what was right, and justice had prevailed. As we all left the study that day, the lesson was clear. No matter how confident someone appears, no matter how clever their tricks, the truth has a way of coming out. And sometimes it only takes one sentence to change everything. Samantha learned a hard lesson that day, and I learned that staying patient, paying attention to the details, and trusting the process can turn even the darkest moment into a victory you never thought possible.
The biggest lesson from my story? Sometimes the smallest detail can change everything. Even when life feels unfair and people try to take advantage of you, staying patient, paying attention to the details, and keeping your cool can completely turn the tables, just like that one sentence in the trust fund did for me. If you loved this story and want to see more real-life drama with shocking twists, hit subscribe and turn on notifications. Don't miss the next story that could keep you on the edge of your seat.